Good time to sing together. Now let's look at God's word together, see what he has for us and how he wants to challenge us and encourage us, convict us. Let's look at it. Psalm 63. Psalm 63. This is one of those psalms that we most likely know when or about when David wrote this or what he was writing it about. And um, this one we see that he wrote in events that were connected with 2 Samuel chapter 15. So if you want to, you can keep a finger in Psalm 63 and then turn to 2 Samuel chapter 15. We're going to look at that as well. This is a low point in David's life, maybe one of the lowest points. Well, it is one of the lowest points in his life. And what makes this point sad in his life is that he brought this about on himself. He is the one that ultimately that's responsible for the events that's happening in 2 Samuel chapter 15. You see, before this, a few years before, David decided to, for reasons that I think I can identify with, my own stupidity, I decide to operate outside of the will of God. And that's what David decided to. Maybe you can relate to that as well. Times that we decide, no, I'm going to do it my way. And at this time, this was a season in his life where he slept with his friend's wife, Bathsheba. And then it didn't stop there. He wanted to cover it up and ultimately covered it up by having the husband killed. And then taking her for his wife and then pretending and lying and getting everybody to believe that she got pregnant after the wedding. And this was something he held to, lived the life of a lie for a season until finally Nathan the prophet came to him in chapter 12 and said, you might have fooled everybody else. You might have been able to throw this lie and convince everybody else, but you can't lie to God and you can't fool him and you have sinned. And David broke down and he repented. And Nathan told him in chapter 12, you're forgiven. But just because you're forgiven, and we need to all remember this too, because you're forgiven doesn't mean that there might not be any consequences. Consequences are actually good for us to be able to maybe convince us not to go that route again. And so there are consequences that Nathan said, you're forgiven, but there's consequences that are going to last your entire life. One of those being, now get this, that God says, I am going to raise up someone in your own house to do evil against you. I'm going to raise up evil from your own house against you, David. And in chapter 15, we find out who that is. And we find this being fulfilled because of the consequence of David's sin. And it turns out to be one of his sons, Absalom, who rises up against David, and David doesn't really know it at first because Absalom is being really tricky about it, and he's just trying to win people over. You see, people would go into Jerusalem, and they would get judgments from the king, and of course, when you get judgments from the king, not everybody's satisfied. And so Absalom was really good at finding those people who maybe didn't get the judgment that maybe they were looking for, maybe not as good as they thought. And then it says in verse 4 of chapter 15, then Absalom would say, he'd be standing at the gate, oh, that I were judge in the land. Then every man with a dispute or cause might come to me, and I would give him justice. If I was in charge, you would have gotten a better ruling than this. And he just slowly convinces people that he would make a better king than his father. And it says in verse 6, thus Absalom did to all of Israel who came to the king for judgment. So Absalom stole the hearts of men of Israel. Verse 7, it says he did this over a period of 4 years. That over this 4 years' time, he began to tip the scales in favor of him and against his own father. Until finally he saw that he had enough people on his side to be able to overthrow his dad. And so then he goes outside of Jerusalem and he gathers up all of these supporters now, and he's now coming back to Jerusalem to overthrow his father and take over the kingdom. And David knows about this. And in verse 14 it says, then David said to all his servants who were with him at Jerusalem, arise and let us flee, or else there will be no escape for us from Absalom. Go quickly, lest he overtake us quickly and bring down ruin on us and strike the city with the edge of the sword. In verse 23, it says, and all the land wept aloud as all the people passed by, and the king crossed the brook Kidron, and all the people passed on toward the wilderness. See, Jerusalem's on this mountain, and on the opposite side of Jerusalem, on the east side, is another mountain called the Mount of Olives. Maybe some of us have heard of that. In between, there's this little valley called the Kidron Valley. So David is now going across this valley, going up the Mount of Olives, and going to be heading into the wilderness, which is beyond the Mount of Olives. So he's leaving. And in verse 24, it says this, and Abiathar came up, and behold, Zadok came also with all the Levites. These are the people who took care of the sanctuary that the Ark of the Covenant was in. And it says they were bearing the Ark of the Covenant of God. They took the Ark of the Covenant. And they set down the Ark of God until the people had passed out of the city. But look at verse 25. Then the king said to Zadok, carry the Ark of God back into the city. If I find favor in the eyes of the Lord, he will bring me back and let me see both it and his dwelling place, that tabernacle. But if he says, I have no pleasure in you, behold, here I am. Let him do to me what seems good to him. David knows this is really my fault. These are consequences of my sin. And you know what? I deserve every single thing that's happening right now. And if God decides to show grace and mercy and allow me to come back, that's up to him. But whatever he decides, that's it. Do you see the humility that this consequence is bringing on him? And so then in verse 29, so Zadok and Abiathar carry the ark of God back to Jerusalem, and they remain there. Verse 30, but David went up the ascent of the Mount of Olives, weeping as he went, barefoot and with his head covered. And all the people who were with him covered their heads, and they went up weeping as they went. Picture them now walking into the wilderness, weeping, broken, heads covered, in this dry and hot and barren place. It's thought that at this time of the year, it was August. The worst time to go out there. People have got to be asking and wondering and thinking and saying, how are we going to survive out here? What's going to happen to us now? And as David looks around, and he's tired, and he's hungry, and he's thirsty, he picks up a piece of parchment, and he picks up a pen, and he starts to write Psalm 63 in response to, how are we going to survive out here? Let me tell you something. We don't even necessarily are going to survive out here. We can even thrive out here. How? Psalm 63. Oh God, you are my God. Earnestly I seek you. My soul thirsts for you. My flesh faints for you as in a dry and weary land where there is no water. So I have looked upon you in the sanctuary, beholding your power and glory, because your steadfast love is better than life. My lips will praise you. So I will bless you as long as I live. In your name I will lift up my hands. My soul will be satisfied as with fat and rich food, and my mouth will praise you with joyful lips when I remember you upon my bed and meditate on you in the watches of the night. For you have been my help, and in the shadow of your wings I will sing for joy. My soul clings to you, your right hand upholds me. And after this focus on God for most of the psalm, he then sees what's going on and what's going to be happening around him. And he goes on in verse 9 and says, but those who seek to destroy my life shall go down into the depths of the earth. They shall be given over to the power of the sword. They shall be a portion for jackals. He's saying, I know that the ultimate end for these people who are outside of God's will, who are deciding to attack God's anointed, who are doing this, I know God's going to take care of them. I know God is going to have consequences for them. I know they'll be punished. In verse 11, he says, but the king shall rejoice in God. All who swear by him, in other words, all people who make an oath to God and follow through with their oath, their commitment to God. You made a commitment to God, you follow through with your commitment to God. You said you want to be under God's will, you're going to live under God's will. And he says, everybody who does that shall exalt. You will rejoice. It will be worth it. For the mouths of liars will be stopped. Interesting that the last phrase he says is so specific about the mouth of liars will be stopped up. Because what I think David is doing in those last couple of verses is, he's teaching everybody else. This is what happens to people outside of God's will. Here's how it is with people who are inside of God's will, who are following him. And the mouths of liars will be stopped up, because I think he's talking about himself. He's saying, these people who are now lies, who have lied over these 4 years, have turned people against me, even my son Absalom, who's turning people against me, and I've been living this lie and convincing people of these lies, God will stop them up, because I speak from experience. I started this. I was the first liar. And I'm telling you guys all, I've already gone down that road. And I'm living in the consequences of that right now. God will stop up every liar. Everybody that's living a fake life. Everybody that's doing this. I know. So don't do it. And now he's come to the other side, and he is going, I am going to stick with my commitment and my oath to God, and I'm not going to leave God's will again. I know what that's like. So how about all of you, before you make the same mistake that I did, how about you just stay in God's will? And in the midst of this, and this teaching at the very end, and in the midst of this psalm, he tells the people not only how they can survive, but how they can thrive in the wilderness. Because here's the questions I would be asking before I would actually look at the psalm and see what the psalm is teaching me. If you ask the question, how can you be okay when nothing is okay? You ever think, how can you be okay when nothing is okay? And I think some of us would say, and I would say, I'm not sure. I don't think can be. How can you be full? How can you be completely satisfied and your life is full in a time of complete emptiness? How can that be? I don't know if you can. How can you have hope when everything is hopeless? I mean, how can you have hope when everything is hopeless? How can you have joy in the middle of misery? David says he has joy 2 times in this psalm. And we just saw what it's connected to, him weeping, barefoot, going into the wilderness in the hottest time of the year, the driest time of the year, and he's saying, I am okay, and I am praising God with joy. How can you do that? At least honestly do it. And he answers that here. And he says basically 3 things. If you're taking notes, take them. If you don't take notes, take notes. So these are so simple, and I see things in God's word. The simplest things are sometimes the deepest things. I think things don't have to be complicated for it to be so deep. And this is so deep and so life-changing. If we remember these 3 things that I see here, that I think David is telling us. And remember, he's writing this song, so they would all sing this in the wilderness together. And the first thing is this. David says, get your eyes back on God. Oh, that's simple. Yeah, really hard too. And really deep. Get your eyes back on God. When I'm going through a hard time, you know what my eyes are on? My hard time. If I'm in the wilderness, you know what I'm thinking about? The wilderness. What's crazy is that David starts this psalm when he picks up that parchment, he picks up the pen, he's out there, and he doesn't write, oh, this desert. Oh, how dry. Oh, how thirsty I am. Oh, what? Oh, God. Get your eyes back on God and keep them on God. He says, and that you are my God. Oh God, you are my God. I might have lost everything else. I don't have a kingdom. I don't have a home. I don't have anything. I still have my God. That's why we put our eyes back on God, because in the times of changing and things, and if everything's ripped out of our lives and everything's gone out of our lives, there is one thing, there is one person who will never, anybody, no situation, no circumstance will ever be able to rip out of your life. Who is that? God. God is the changeless thing when everything changes. God is the thing that we can anchor into. God is the person that we can anchor into when everything else just falls apart. The relationship that we have with him doesn't change, even when circumstances and experiences change, even if we feel like it's changed. Could Absalom take away David's kingdom? Yes. Could he take away David's God? He couldn't. Does David, just because he thinks himself, I might never ever go to the tabernacle and see the ark of God again, because he's never going to be in the tabernacle and into that place of worship and be around the ark of God again. Does that mean his relationship with God has been broken? No. Does that take him away from God? No. So get your eyes back on God. It's hard. It's not natural. But that's what you do. Number two. Remember, you need God more than you need the situation to change. This is hard. It's so true. If I just told you that it's true, I think all of us, well, that's true. Okay, do I believe that? That I need God way more than I need the situation to change. Look what David says in the next line of verse 1. Earnestly I seek you. Earnestly I seek you. My soul thirsts for you. My flesh faints for you, as in a dry and weary land where there's no water. It's so interesting. He actually connects it with the situation he's in, and he compares it to the situation he's in, but it's so weird. Do you see how he says, you know what? It's like I'm if I was in a dry and weary land where there's no water, what would I really thirst for? I'd thirst for water. That's what I would want, water. I would just want water. I would desperately need water. He goes, I'm putting that aside because my situation isn't what's the most important thing. You know what I need to thirst after even more than water? God. I thirst after you. My soul longs for you. My flesh, not only my soul, my whole body, everything I am wants you, needs you, God, as if I'm in a dry and thirsty land, which is exactly where he's at. And so he's taking that need that he feels like he has in the situation, and then he redirects it back to God. As much as I need it, no, I need this way more. He doesn't say, earnestly, I seek water. Earnestly, I seek Jerusalem. I seek my bed back at home. This is so sad that, guys, I would be out there and I think I'd be going, oh, God, please give me a pair of shoes. I need shoes. And that's exactly what we do at times. We look at our situation and that has to be fixed, and we have to have the things met. We got to have this met. And no, David's going, you guys want to know how we can survive out here? You want to know how we can thrive out here? Get your focus back on God. And then would you believe yourself, tell yourself, remember that you need God more than you need any of this to be fixed. Do you believe that? If you do, everything changes. He says, man, I remember your power and your glory and your steadfast love. So when you're saying, remembering that you need God, remember that you need all of who he is, everything about him. I don't need this to be fixed. I just need God's power. And God's power is right here. I don't need this to be fixed. I just need God to be glorified. That's all I need. I don't need this to be fixed. I need God's love. In fact, God's steadfast love is better than living. If I just have his love, that is better than life. If I don't have his love, nothing is worth living anyway. You see that? That's who he is. That's who we need, right? And that's what he reminds himself of, and these people. And then number 3, it ties it together, ties it all up. So get your eyes back on God. Realize you need him more than you need anything to be fixed. Then realize, number 3, realize you have God. And so you don't need anything else. You have God, and he has you. Your relationship with God hasn't been broken. Your relationship with God is still there. It is still complete. He still loves you. He still has his power that wants to work in your life. He still wants to be glorified in your life. He wants to work in your life. He is there. You are with him. And because of that, you don't need anything else. You have everything you need. If you want to write that down, I have everything I need if I have God. And I have God. So I have everything I need. That's why he says in verses 5 and on, he says, my soul will be satisfied with fat and rich food. Does he have fat and rich food out there? No. He says, my soul is what's the issue, and my soul will be satisfied with fat and rich food. It's like I have a 7-course meal out here. And my mouth will praise you with joyful lips when I remember you upon my bed and meditate you in the watches of the night. I'm going to keep my eyes on you. I'm going to keep remembering I need you more than anything. And I am now filled because I know you fill me, because in verse 7, you have been my help. And in the shadow of your wings, I will sing for joy. My soul clings to you. Your right hand upholds me. We are together. You're always my help. I don't care what you give me, God. You are my help. And then he get that picture. He says, out here in this desert with all the wild animals and everything around, there's no walls, there's no nothing. It's not safe. It's scary out there. It's dangerous out there. And he says, I am under the shadow of your wings. I am like a little chick underneath the wings of that hen that gives security and safety and care to that child. That's exactly where I am right now. This stuff out here is lying to me. The stuff in here is what matters. And in here, this stuff can't change. And I am under the shadow of his wings right now. And I am clinging to him like a little kid that wraps their arms around that parent's leg. And we're not the bad parent that goes, get off of me. He's the parent that goes, I think sometimes we actually think God does do that. Will you just get off of me? He doesn't. He picks you up when you cling to him, and he holds you in his right hand, the hand of authority and power and safety and security. He holds you right there. You cling to him, and he is holding you. And David's going, that's the truth, so why am I not okay? I'm more than okay. I'm not surviving, I'm thriving. Those 3 things. Get your eyes back on God. Will you convince yourself of the truth that you need God way more than you need anything to change? And then will you realize that you have God? And so because you have God, you have everything you need. Number 4. I'm going to give you number 4. I know. Number 4, write this down. Go back to number 1. Okay? That's number 4. Because this is a circle. This isn't okay, I've done this thing, so now I'm good. This is a continual thing for your entire life. It is a circle that you go through over and over and over again. Rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. He says it in verse 4, so I will bless you tonight. So I'll bless you during this season. I will bless you what? As long as I live. This is a forever thing. And in verse 5 and 6 where he says, my soul will be satisfied as with fat and rich food. My mouth will praise you with joyful lips when I remember you upon my bed and meditate on you in the watches of the night. There were 3 watches in the night. There were 4 hours each, basically 6 p.m. to 10 p.m., 10 p.m. to 2 a.m., 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. Those are the watches of the night. He says, I am going to meditate on you for how many watches? All of them. When I'm going to bed sometime between 6 p.m. and 10 p.m., when I'm going to bed sometime there, you know what I'm doing? I'm doing this. I'm going to put my eyes back onto God. I need him more than I need anything to be changed. As I'm going to bed, I'm going to remember this. And I have him. And so I have everything I need. When I wake up at 2 a.m. and my mind starts racing during that second watch of the night, and I know none of you can relate to that, and you start going, and you start worrying, and you start going, how come? And why isn't this? And what if this doesn't? Wait a second. I'm putting my eyes back onto God. I need him more than I need anything else to be changed. And I have him, so I have everything I need. And when you get up at 6 a.m. to start the next day, you remind yourself as you're getting up for the day, I'm putting my eyes on God today. I need him more than I need anything else to do or not do, change or not, whatever. And I have him, so I have everything I need. And you will find yourself able not only to survive in times of emptiness and when you have nothing and when nothing is okay, you'll find yourself not only able to survive, but you will actually thrive. What an incredible psalm. Let's pray to that end right now as the band comes up and we worship him together. Oh God, thank you again for this time that you give us to simply look into your word. And this time that you actually had David pick up a piece of parchment and write something. Because I know he needed to write it. He needed to see it. He needed to remind himself that he's okay. Oh God, that we would do that as well. I don't know what we're going through. Some of us, we're not even going through a time like that right now. But we will. Some of us are right in the middle of it. Some of us are about to face it today. Oh God, I know you've given us a psalm at the right time and the right place for us to hear. And so God, we tell you now, and we want to commit to you and stay committed to you and cling to you. And God, we want to put our eyes back on you. We've taken our eyes off of you. We've gotten distracted by these other things, these other people, God, our eyes back on you. And God, we know we need you, and we proclaim we need you more than we need anything to change. We need you and your power and your glory and your love. And then, God, we thank you and bless you and sing for joy because we have it. Because our relationship with you, that we've given our lives to you because your son, Jesus Christ, and all of what you've done in the gospel to save us, we are in awe. And so, God, we have you, so we have everything. Oh, God, there's some of us going, I still pray that it would change. God, that's okay. I know you said that. That's okay. Pray it. But know that you're okay. God, we're going to claim to you that we're okay whether you change it or not. And we bless you as long as we live. And we worship you now through song, knowing you're everything we need. In the name of your son, Jesus, we thank you. Amen.